Welcome back, weirdos, and get ready for another Ward Tales story. I only have one story for you at the moment, but the next video should be coming out very soon, and that should have a couple of stories to it. Oh yes, and for those who are curious, that bowel obstruction that I talked about last time, it's finally starting to clear up, so yay me! Now, he was 7 or so when it happened. I wonder exactly how much of it he still remembers. It's better if I don't use his real name. Peter. That's an easy name to remember. Peter's my nephew, and this is his story as well as I understand it. Peter had a keen interest in dinosaurs, the big monsters, the bones, the sharp teeth. His toy box was full of those solid plastic dinosaur toys that don't move. His walls had vicious dinosaur decals, sharp-toothed velociraptors, and there was even a pterodactyl decoration that was hanging on the wall. You can guess what his favorite doll was. Yeah, a T-Rex. When he played dinosaurs or fossil hunt. He hated when I made the toys kiss because he wanted them savage, ferocious, and monstrous. There was a day when I wasn't around that Peter was extremely bored. He begged to go over to his friend's house, but his parents wouldn't let him. The high point of the day came a few hours before sunset when his friend remarkably came over. He came alone, without his parents. This curious fact is something Peter completely ignored as he answered the door. I bet he just wanted to play dinosaurs or fossil hunt the whole time. I know him too well. They must have played for about an hour before his mother called him into her room. She told him that she had just gotten off the phone with the friend's mother. They were all gone to their grandfather's funeral. His friend couldn't come play because he was almost 100 miles away and wouldn't be back in town until the weekend was over. Peter laughed. He didn't believe it. He had no reason to. After all, his friend was playing with him in his room. Peter dragged his mom in there to prove it. Toys were scattered about. It was the same scene he had left from, but with no friend. "Where are you?" Peter called out to his friend. No response. His mother shrugged and went back to her shows, but Peter poked around the house. "Hey, we ain't playing hide and seek. Come on, let's get back to my room." Come out, wherever you are." He saw the door wide open. Did his friend leave, or did Peter leave it open when he answered the door? He had the habit of doing that. Peter thought hard as he went back to his room and examined the possibility that his friend left without saying anything. Strange, he thought. 10 p.m. came. "All right, Pete. It's almost bedtime," his dad said as cartoon credits rolled on the TV. Peter ran off to bed and climbed in with all his stuffed toys. The lights were turned off for him, and he closed his eyes in complete silence. The only light came from the moon through the window. It made an elongated pattern of the window in a bluish glow. Suddenly, a noise came from under his bed. Monsters? Under his bed? No, he was too old for that. He opened his eyes and looked around at the big decals, toys, and posters. A lot of teeth radiated bluish white from the moonlight. He liked it, but the noise under his bed still made him uncomfortable. Then, suddenly beside Peter's bed stood his friend, grinning deeply. His eyes and teeth were glowing from the moonlight along with the dinosaurs. Had he really been hiding under the bed this whole time? What was he doing? Why was he there? His friend said he wanted to show him some real-life dinosaur fossils. Peter says he didn't believe him at first and wanted to just go to sleep. He said that something about him made Peter uncomfortable at first, but eventually his curiosity and imagination got the best of him. He thought about what he would do with them, displaying them, showing them off at school. It would make him very popular to have real fossils. Convinced, Peter and his friend snuck out around midnight. The backyard breaks into woods, with loads of jumbled trails running through it. There's even a path that leads directly to my house if you walk it for about a half an hour. The paths are very worn from dirt bikes and ATVs, and there's even a few deer stands that serve as great markers. It wasn't easy to get lost in the day, but I wouldn't recommend it for a 7-year-old at night. I don't even think he had a flashlight. They wandered for a while. Eventually, they came to a clearing after around 10 minutes of walking. I know the spot that he described. It has the best looking deer stand out there. Okay, where is it? Now they were both at the open clearing. Peter's friend, whom he had heard moving behind him a few seconds before, was silent. No response from behind. Peter turned around to see nothing. No one was there. His friend was hiding again. Peter yelled out for him, but not a peep was heard in return. He must have been getting very upset. His own friend left him behind alone in the woods. Maybe he was just going to pop out and scare Peter. A slight wave of panic kicked in, but Peter quickly rationalized that he would just wait his friend out. In the meantime, he would look for the fossils. He scouted the clearing carefully while keeping an ear out for his friend. After making several passes through, Peter gave up. He decided that there were no bones. His friend was playing a joke on him this whole time. That annoying weirdo. Where was he hiding? If you don't come out now, I'll leave you here. Peter started walking back and couldn't remember which way to go. He paced around, getting more and more panicked. He would check a path, see something he didn't recognize, and turn back to the clearing over and over. Dread washed over him. He was alone and lost in the woods at night. He tried to remember what it looked like in the day, but nothing looked familiar. Peter has played in those woods many times, but always in the day. Helpless and hopeless, he worried. What if he waited until daytime? He could find his way then, but what if his parents woke up before he could get back home? He would get in so much trouble if they knew he snuck out. That poor little mess of a kid sat and sobbed for a while until he remembered where the deer stand was when he first walked into the clearing. He used that as a reference point and made for what he believed to be the right path. A few steps in, he heard a snap. It wasn't him. His friend was still somewhere around. He walked out into the darkness, and there was nothing. All right, give up. I'm done playing with you. Peter took a few more steps down the trail, and a loud snap echoed out. It came from something much bigger than his friend. The sound jolted him, and he swung around in fright. Still, it seemed there was nothing. Until he noticed the familiar bluish-white glow of a pattern he had seen many times in his room. But it didn't make sense. It was the exact same as the posters in his room. The jagged, long, white teeth of a vicious monster. It wasn't his friend's, no, he soon realized with fright. It was a huge set of shiny raptor teeth. It couldn't be real, just a trick of the moonlight. A guttural rumbling came out from it, and eyes opened above the teeth. Tapedum lucidum. That is the layer of tissue in the eye that causes them to glow at night. It's more noticeable in nocturnal animals and carnivores. The effect is known as eye shine. That is what he saw. Eyes shining green. Peter felt the blood flush out of him as he struggled to make sense out of what he was seeing. Maybe he was still in bed. Maybe his fascination with dinosaurs finally gave him the nightmare he had been warned of many times. It just couldn't be real. With the snap of a small stick, the teeth lunged at him. As it came into the moonlight, he could better see the features. its massive reptile body, the sharp claws, the tail. It really was a raptor. He had no time to rationalize it. He just had to run. Peter sprinted as fast as he could, losing track of the trail within a few seconds. He jumped over logs and stumbled on rocks. It followed behind, getting closer and closer, with its mouth wide open. It was so close that he could hear the sticks and leaves getting crushed directly behind him, and the huffing and puffing grumble of its breath. Then he could feel it on his neck. He was no match for its speed. You know the horror movie cliché of tripping while being chased? It happens so much that you start to think it's an overused device in stories. Let's see how well you avoid tripping when you're running for your life in the dark and there's obstacles everywhere that you can't see. Peter went down face first after catching his foot into a small hole. He had no time to shield himself and had a face full of pulpy brown dirt with little pieces of leaves. The raptor ran past him, unable to slow down size. It shuffled for a U-turn as Peter limped to his feet with a new pain in his ankle. He tried to ignore it as he changed directions again. He ran as fast as he could with the sharp pain shooting through his leg, falling a few more times and rolling to his feet. The pain was making it difficult to run, but the enclosing sound of leaves crunching kept him from giving up. Suddenly, mid-run, Peter went from full speed to an instant stop. He was caught in briars. The pain of dozens of little needles set in after a brief second. He didn't realize how close the beast was until it ran past again. It ran past, not noticing Peter stuck. He freed himself and started down a slope. It became so steep that he went from running to skidding along, sticks and rocks picking up behind him. The slope got less intense as he got lower and eventually flattened out. Peter kept going the same direction, and soon he felt a drop. His legs went cold and wet. Then his feet became wet, as water seeped through his shoes. He was in a stream, and it went all the way to his knees before he crossed it. On the other side, Peter caught his breath and thought about his condition. His ankle was hurt. He was covered in scratches. He was alone and lost, cold and wet, and there was a vicious monster that wanted to eat him. It was a bit of a climb, but he pulled himself uphill till he was at a less dense portion of the woods. With it being much brighter, a sense of safety set in, but it didn't last long. A bellowing growl thundered from nearby. It was still coming, and Peter needed to move it, but his body was in no condition to keep running. His panicked eyes looked around for anything, lights, roads, any signs of life. He listened for cars and dogs. There were no signs of civilization, just an old deer stand. It was nice quality a long time ago, but now it's just rotten boards and loose rusty nails. I knew that one well. It isn't far from my house. Peter limped over to it and started climbing the wooden ladder. 2 rungs high from the ground, the next one popped off as he pulled his weight up. The new gap made it almost too much for him. The distance between rungs made it harder, but he eventually pulled himself up. Just in time, too, as the outline of the beast came into the well-lit area. It huffed and sniffed as Peter quivered, laying prone on the floor of the stand. It was angrily seeking for the hiding boy. Come out, wherever you are," Peter heard his friend say. "Aw, Peter, come on. This game is boring. Why don't you come out? Stop hiding. Let's play something else." Peter peeked an eye out to see his friend. "We can play dinosaur hunt." He could only see the beastly raptor with its mouth agape. "I'll be the meat eater, and you can be the meat." It spoke in his friend's voice. The beast turned quickly to Peter when he was done speaking, and seemed to be looking directly at him. It charged at the stand and jumped at the top. The beast couldn't reach Peter, but every time it tried to jump up there, the whole stand would shake. It did this 6 or 7 more times and stopped. "Peter, come on down. Don't make this so hard. Come down now, or I'll tear this down and eat you. Then I'll eat your whole family." Peter cried at the threat, making trails of dirt in his face. "Leave me alone! Please stop!" Crash, slam, the creature rammed into the stand over and over. "Help! Help! No more!" he cried. He cried as loud as he could. He yelled over and over for help into the dark, silent night. The banging grew worse and worse. The boards were coming down. The ladder was completely gone. No safe way down now. Crack, crack. More boards came down. The roof was now falling in on Peter. It wasn't safe to stay, and he couldn't leave. All he could do was cry out. I was stepping out into the backyard to relieve myself, and I heard something. It sounded like goats at first, and I thought about how they sometimes sound like terrified screams. Then I heard the goat speak. It cried for help. I forgot about my current needs and ran back in. Adrenaline was pumping, and I was shaking as I came back out with a pump-action shotgun. Fully loaded. Blam, 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 blam. I emptied it out into the air. I loaded again and could still hear the cries for help. "Whoever's out there needs to know. I've got a fully loaded shotgun and half a brain," I shouted as fair warning. I don't know why I went out there. Most people would just call the cops, but I've never been in the habit of calling them, so that idea didn't come up. I followed the same trail that I always took to my brother's house until the shouting seemed to be coming off trail. It might have been 5 minutes of stumbling through brush and briars, dropping my flashlight several times, and a good few minutes of mumbled curses before I felt close enough to the source. I moved closer and closer, and things went silent for a while. I stopped and waited for a sign. Cries started again from a different direction. I let out something like, "Hello, what's wrong?" After that, the cries started back up from the first position I'd heard them from. Now there were two voices calling for help. One would yell out and the other one would repeat almost exactly. It was confusing. I thought maybe it was an echo at first because the voices sounded alike, but they said slightly different things. One would moan and the other one would give out a slightly different groan. The cries were getting softer and softer, so I had to choose. I went with the first sound that I heard and ran. Maybe 30 yards away I came to the scene. The ruins of that wooden deer stand were scattered about. I found my own nephew in a pile with the wood. I set the gun down and assessed him as best I could. He was mumbling about a monster that wanted to eat him in the woods. What was going on? Was there some guy out here creeping on kids? He was covered in scratches. His tibia and both bones in his left wrist were broken. But I was still worried about internal issues. It looked like he took a nasty fall out of the stand. I wondered what happened and scooped him up. "Come on, there's another kid out here too. We need to find him." I hadn't heard the other voice since I'd found Peter, but I was too focused on him to notice the silence. "Oh, don't. That's the monster." My shotgun blast had supposedly scared it away. I didn't believe Peter's words at the time, but something was suspicious about how it mimicked his voice earlier. What would have happened if I went to that voice first instead? I marched out of those woods with Peter in my arms and the shotgun strapped around my shoulder. A dead silence had shrouded the forest. No crickets or anything. The whole walk there were no sounds at all. Making it back, I rushed in and called my brother to let him know what happened, and let him know that I was taking Peter to the hospital. Before I left, I peeked out the back door and scanned the trees. I don't know how deep it was, but I saw something. Out in those dark woods, I could see the eyeshine of a creature. The size of the animal must have been incredible. I know they were far away, but they were bigger than any animal's eyes I could think of. Under them, I could scarcely see the faint, bluish-white points of what looked like a feigned grin. Nobody else believes him. He's safe today, but nobody ever believed him. He stopped trying to convince his family about almost being eaten. He stopped trying to tell his friend about the doppelganger. He just tried to forget. I haven't forgotten. I can't forget, and I believe. Not because of anything that happened that night to me, but because of what followed. Weeks after that, I heard crying in the woods. I still hear it sometimes. It's so troubling. That thing could be trying to lure me out there for revenge, or it could be something worse. What if its other victims are out there, crying for help? Tricked children. And I'm not going to help because of fear. Fear that it's a trick. I believe that I've had multiple run-ins with that thing, but those are other stories for another time. Remind me to tell you about the deadliest squirrel I've ever seen.
Well, weirdos, what did you think about that story? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Did you fall asleep? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more.